Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time, we're going to look at the incredible impact of tiny habits and how they can create so.
Exactly. And we're talking about everything here. Like, they redesigned the bike seats to be super comfortable. They even tested different materials for the suits to make them more aerodynamic. They even looked at what kind of pillows the riders were using so they could sleep better.
Hold on, even the pillows.
Hmm.
Did they really think that would make a difference?
You'd be surprised. They even went so far as to teach the riders the proper way to wash their hands to avoid getting sick. It might sound a little obsessive, right? But that was Brailsford's whole philosophy. Control what you can control. Make every detail perfect no matter how small.
And get this, it actually worked. This whole philosophy led them to win tons of victories at the Olympics and the Tour de France. They went from a team that couldn't even get good bikes to being the best in the world. It just shows you how powerful it can be to keep improving little by little.
It really shows how even small changes, when you do them over and over, can add up to some amazing results. And that's actually exactly what James Clear talks about in his book, Atomic Habits, which is what we're diving into today. We're going to take a good look at chapter 1 and really try to understand what's behind these tiny changes, these atomic habits, and how they can help you change your life for the better.
So it's not about making these big changes or trying to be successful overnight. It's more about making small improvements over time.
That's it. Think of it like compound interest, but for your habits. Clear has a great example in his book. He says if you improve just 1% every day for a whole year, you'll end up 37 times better by the end of that year.
Wow, 37 times. Okay, that's pretty convincing.
Right. But here's the other side of that. If you get 1% worse each day for a year, you'll practically be back to zero. It's all about whether you're moving forward or backward, little by little, that decides where you'll end up.
So even the choices that seem really small, the ones we barely think about, are actually moving us towards either growth or decline.
Exactly. And that's why understanding these atomic habits is so important. It's not just about having good habits, it's about designing your life in a way that gets you where you want to go, taking it one step at a time.
Okay, this sounds great, but let's be real. Most of us have trouble staying consistent, right? We set big goals, we're excited for a couple days, and then life happens and we forget all about it. So how do we bridge that gap between knowing how powerful these tiny habits are and actually making them a part of our lives?
That's a really great question, and it really gets at why focusing on systems is so important. We tend to get caught up in wanting those big, amazing goals, but it's the systems we set up, the things we do every day, that actually create lasting change.
Okay, I see. So it's not about achieving the goal, it's about setting up the right system to get there.
You got it. Claire actually argues that focusing too much on goals can cause a bunch of problems.
Let's dive into those problems because I think we've all been guilty of focusing on the goal and not the journey.
Okay, so the first problem is that both winners and losers often have the same goals. It's not the goal itself that makes the difference, it's the system they have. Think about it, every Olympic athlete wants to win a gold medal, but only a few get to do it. What makes those champions different is their dedication to training every day. They pay close attention to what they eat, how they recover, everything. Basically, they have a great system.
So it's about loving the process, the things you do every day, that commitment to showing up and doing the work, even when the goal seems far away.
Exactly. And that leads to the second problem with focusing too much on goals. When you achieve a goal, it's just a temporary change. You might reach your goal weight or get that dream job or finish that marathon. But if you haven't changed the underlying systems that got you there, you're likely to go back to your old ways.
It's like when you clean your whole house and it feels amazing for a day. But then those messy habits come back, and before you know it, you're back where you started. So it's not enough to just reach the goal. You have to change the habits that created the problem in the first place.
Exactly. The system is what creates lasting change. It's about developing consistent habits, the things you do automatically in response to life's cues, that ultimately shape who you become.
This is really making me think. It's shifting my thinking away from just focusing on the outcome and toward a more long-term, process-oriented way of looking at things. So what are the other problems with focusing too much on goals?
Well, the third problem is that it often makes you delay happiness until you achieve that goal. It creates this mindset of, I'll be happy when,
Hmm.
like when I lose weight or when I get that promotion or when I buy a house.
That's so true. It's like we're putting our happiness on hold, always chasing some future version of ourselves instead of being happy right now with the journey itself.
And the fourth problem is that it can lead to this yo-yo effect. You reach the goal, you celebrate, you relax. Then without that goal pushing you, you slide back into those old habits. We see this a lot with people who lose weight for a special event. only to gain it all back when the event's over.
So if we shouldn't focus on goals, what should we focus on? How do we put this systems first approach into action in our own lives?
That's where the magic of atomic habits comes in. It's about shifting our focus away from setting these huge goals and toward building a system of tiny improvements. Those atomic habits that, when you do them consistently, add up over time to big results.
This is starting to make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But before we get into how to actually build those atomic habits, let's take a step back and look at why we even have habits in the first place.
Great point. Understanding the science behind how habits are formed can give us some great clues on how to use them for positive change. Our brains are constantly trying to save energy, and habits are like shortcuts that automate our behavior.
So they're like those well-worn paths you see in the forest. The more you walk them, the easier and more automatic they become.
That's a perfect analogy. And to understand how to build new good habits, we need to understand how habits are made. It's all about understanding that underlying mechanism.
That makes sense. Let's do it. So our brains are always trying to find these shortcuts, these habits to save energy. But how does that actually work? Like, what's the science behind how a habit forms?
Okay, so picture this. You're learning a new way to get to work. The first few times, you really have to pay attention to everything, right? Every turn, every landmark. It takes real effort, like you're using a lot of brain power. But as you do it day after day, something happens. It starts to feel more automatic. You don't have to think about it as much. You just sort of do it.
Oh yeah, it's like it becomes subconscious. You're just on autopilot.
Right. That's because your brain started making a habit loop. And this loop has three main parts: a cue, a routine, and a reward. The cue is what triggers the behavior. It could be a certain time of day, a place, a feeling you have, or even finishing another habit.
So for the new route to work, the cue could be like leaving the house in the morning.
Exactly. The cue tells your brain, okay, time to start the sequence. Then you have the routine, which is the actual behavior itself in this case, driving that new route. And last, there's the reward. That's the good feeling you get that makes the habit loop stronger.
So the reward for driving the new route could be that feeling of, yes, made it to work safely and on time. Or maybe it's avoiding all that traffic you used to hit on your old way.
Exactly. The reward strengthens that connection between the cue and the routine. It makes you more likely to do it again next time.
So over time, this loop gets so ingrained that we don't even have to think about it. It's just automatic, like when we brush our teeth or check our phones first thing in the morning.
Exactly. And this is where those atomic habits come in. Once we get how this habit loop works, we can start to design those tiny changes, those marginal gains that can really change our lives.
This is so interesting. So how do we actually use this knowledge to build better habits? Give us the how-to.
Well, in his book, James Clear has this awesome framework. He calls them the 4 laws of behavior change. And they give you these actionable steps to kind of hack into that habit loop so you can make any behavior easier or harder to do.
Okay, I'm listening. Tell me about these 4 laws.
All right, so the first law is make it obvious. Remember how we were talking about cues being those triggers for habits? This law is all about making those cues really stand out. Like, you can't miss them.
Right.
So instead of just saying to yourself, I should drink more water, put a full water bottle on your desk every morning where you can see it.
Right, because out of sight, out of mind. If it's right there in front of me, I'm way more likely to actually drink it.
Exactly. And it's not just about things you can see. You can also use these things called implementation intentions, which are basically like if-then statements that connect a specific cue to something you want to do. So like, if it's 7 a.m., then I'm going to meditate for 10 minutes.
I like that. It's like you're programming your brain for success. Okay, so
Sure.
make it obvious check. What's the second law?
The second law is to make it attractive. It's much easier to stick with habits that we actually enjoy, things that give us pleasure or make us feel good. So the question is, how can we make those healthy habits more tempting and those unhealthy habits less appealing?
So like instead of forcing myself to eat plain broccoli, maybe I could roast it with some garlic and Parmesan cheese. Make it taste better.
Exactly, you got it. It's all about finding ways to make the good habits more enjoyable, so you connect them with positive feelings. And on the flip side, you can make those unwanted habits less attractive. So if you're trying to cut back on social media, delete those tempting apps from your phone. Or use a website blocker while you're working. That way it's harder to get to those distractions.
It's like you're tricking your brain, but in a good way. Make it attractive or unattractive. Got it. So what's next?
All right, the third law is make it easy. Basically, make it easier to do the good habit and harder to do the bad habit. We're just way more likely to do something if it doesn't take a lot of effort.
So instead of just relying on willpower, It's about setting myself up for success.
Exactly. If you want to work out in the morning, lay out your clothes the night before. If you're trying to read more, keep a book on your nightstand instead of your phone. It's all about making the things you want to do as easy as possible.
And for the bad habits, it's about making them harder to do.
Right. Right. Want to spend less time on screens? Put your phone in a drawer during dinner or set time limits for apps. It's about creating those little roadblocks that make it a little bit harder to do the things you don't want to do.
Okay, this makes sense. Make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy. What's the fourth and final law?
The fourth law is make it satisfying. We naturally want to do things that feel good and avoid things that feel bad. So if a habit is rewarding, we're more likely to keep doing it.
Okay, but how do you make those good habits feel more satisfying? Sometimes those healthy choices aren't exactly the most fun things in the world.
Well, that's where you have to get a little creative. It could be something as simple as keeping track of your progress in a way that you enjoy. Like seeing that chain of successes in your habit tracker can be really motivating.
Oh, I love habit trackers. It's like this visual reminder of what I'm committed to, and I really don't want to break the streak.
You see, you've already found a way to make it satisfying. And for those tasks that just aren't fun on their own, try pairing them with something you love. Listen to your favorite podcast while you clean. Or reward yourself with a healthy treat after a workout.
This is great. It feels like we're not just talking about changing habits, we're talking about changing our whole approach to self-improvement.
You got it. It's not about forcing ourselves to do things we hate. It's about understanding how habits actually work and using that knowledge to create a system that guides us towards our goals.
This is all making a lot of sense. But if these habits are supposed to be atomic, those tiny 1% improvements, how do we know which ones to focus on? There's so much we could do, our health, work, relationships. Where do we even begin? Okay, so we've talked about the four laws of behavior change. Make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, and make it satisfying. This framework is amazing for building any habit. But how do we figure out which tiny changes, which atomic habits are really going to make the biggest difference in our lives? I mean, there's so many areas we could focus on, right? Our health, our work, relationships. Where do we even start?
That's where things get really interesting. It's not just about picking any old habit. It's about finding those keystone habits,
Yeah.
the ones that create this ripple effect. They have a positive impact on other areas of your life.
Keystone habits. I like that. Sounds like some habits are like these foundation blocks that can set off a whole chain of good changes. So
Mhm.
what are they? How do we spot them?
Okay, so think of them like the pillars that hold up a strong life. They create this structure that helps you make better choices overall. And a great example is exercise.
Okay, exercise. We all know it's good for us, but how is it a keystone habit?
Well, when you make exercise a regular part of your life, it often leads to other positive changes. You start thinking more about what you eat, you sleep better, you have more energy, more confidence, and all those things start affecting other parts of your life.
So it's not just about the physical benefits, it's about the mindset, that discipline and self-care that starts spilling over into everything else.
You got it. It creates this base for making healthier choices in all parts of your life. And another powerful keystone habit is sleep.
Sleep. I'm always up for a good night's sleep. Tell me, how is something as simple as sleep a keystone habit?
Well, when you make sure you're getting good quality sleep consistently, your brain works better, you're less cranky, you have more energy, you make smarter decisions, and all those things help you do better at work, have stronger relationships, you just feel better overall.
So sleep isn't just about resting our bodies. It's about setting ourselves up to succeed at everything.
Exactly. It's like hitting the reset button every night, giving your mind and body a chance to recharge for the next day.
I see how these keystone habits can really trigger positive change. Any other examples we should know about?
Oh, absolutely. Learning a new skill, practicing gratitude, even making your bed every morning. All of these can be keystone habits that start a chain reaction of positive changes.
Okay, so we need to find our own keystone habits, those foundational things that have the power to change different areas of our lives. But how do we choose the right ones to focus on when there's so many options?
It's all about self-discovery. Ask yourself, what parts of my life feel the most stuck? What problems do I keep running into? What are those positive changes I'm really craving?
So it's about finding the areas where we really want improvement. Those things where we feel like if only I could change this one thing, everything else would be better.
That's a great way to put it. Once you've found those areas, start thinking about small, doable habits that can address those challenges. Want to have better relationships? Maybe a keystone habit could be practicing active listening or telling your loved ones how much you appreciate them every day.
I love how this whole idea puts us in control of our own lives.
Yeah.
Like we can design our own destinies. It's not about waiting for something outside of us to change things. It's about realizing that we have the power to shape our own reality, one small habit at a time.
You nailed it. It's about understanding that small, consistent actions, those atomic habits, when you add them up over time, they can create the life we really want.
This has been such an inspiring deep dive. I feel motivated and ready to start building my own system of atomic habits. And for everyone listening, we challenge you to join us on this journey. Think about this. What's one tiny change, one atomic habit you can start doing today? That, if you keep doing it, could have a huge impact on your life a year from now.
Remember, it doesn't have to be a big, dramatic change. It could be something as simple as drinking a glass of water when you wake up, taking a 5-minute walk at lunch, or telling someone you care about how much they mean to you.
Start small, be consistent, and you'll be amazed at how those tiny changes can transform your life. We're all in this together, one atomic habit at a time.